What's up guys, Noah here with CustomRCMods, and in today's episode I'm coming at you with yet another custom quad build. This one here is my Ultralight 75mm 1S whoop, as inspired by Mr. Shutterbug's rendition of this project. He was the one that stumbled upon this formula for great efficiency as well as amazing performance and great power. So go ahead and check out his channel. I'll leave a link to it down in the description below. He's really pushing the envelope on all those things, the performance of micro drones and whoops in general. So go ahead and check that out if that's something that interests you. So as always, we're going to go ahead and run through the specs on this build, and then we're going to take it out for a flight after that. And before we really get into that, I do want to go ahead and talk about my prompt, my main goal, I guess, for this project, which was to have a whoop that would replace all whoops. As you can see, I don't have any small micro drones besides just a few on the bottom row of that pegboard there, and that's because I really was getting frustrated. There really wasn't a micro drone that was something that it was being really reliable for me, that wouldn't break, or that wouldn't have such a low flight time that it wasn't really that fun to just constantly recharge your batteries over and over again. So that kind of got me discouraged when flying micro drones. So I decided to go ahead and sell all those off in favor of building a brand new one here that's going to have all the high-end components that I want on it, and hopefully can do everything from indoor and outdoor flight, as well as going from freestyle to racing style flight, and then also be very, very efficient for good flight times, so we don't have to really worry about burning through batteries so quickly and then just going immediately back to recharge them. I also found it really important to make this a 1S whoop, where battery charging would be as simple as just plugging them into a USB charger rather than getting out my big Hoda D6 Pro and balance charging them. So that was just something that was a little bit more important to me. Let's go ahead and talk about my different components for the build here. The frame, first off, is the Mobula 7 V3 frame. And this is a little bit heavier than Mr. Shutterbug's frame of choice, which was the V2. It's 1 gram heavier, but you can see these spokes are a lot more durable. And I think that reliability and durability when bashing this thing around the house is going to be a lot more important to me than that 1 gram, considering the power profile of this quad. Speaking of power, the next stop is the motors here, and these are the Happymodel EV0802 19,000 kV Unibel motors. They're super nice, probably some of the nicest micro motors on the market here. They're the exact same ones that he recommended for the build, as well as the same HQ 1.6 inch props there, and I believe they have the 1mm shaft on there as well. Now for my central flight controller all-in-one unit, it has the flight controller ESC, receiver, and video transmitter all built in. This one is the BetaFPV F4 1S all-in-one board. So it has, of course, the F411 processor, a 5-amp BLLES ESC, and then a 25 milliwatt analog video transmitter, and a Freestyle X SPI receiver. So none of those are really all too special. I've had whoops like this that I've had Crossfire and a 200 milliwatt video transmitter on them, but I think this one's just going to be a little bit better because, again, I'm going for lightweight, and I'm not really going to be flying this long range where I'm going to need more than 25 milliwatts or, again, more than that 2.4 gigahertz SPI RX can handle. Finally, of course, I've got my camera right here. This is the Runcam Nano 3. It's only 1 gram, and the picture quality is actually surprisingly decent. It's not quite as good as some of the other nano cameras that I've tried. However, the weight is something that's, again, really important to me on this build, so I went ahead and went for that. Now, in Mr. Shutterbug's video, he goes ahead and makes a lot of different upgrades to his quad, trying to shave as much weight off of there as possible. I did not do any of that. You can see I still have all my motor plugs on there, and I haven't done anything to my wires to make them lighter or to this frame to go ahead and lighten it up. I just went ahead and secured my camera with a big glob of hot glue, and that alone should show you that weight is not my #1 concern. It's more just durability. So overall, this quad weighs in at 21 grams, which is like 5 grams heavier than his build was, which shows great potential for this thing to become lighter down the line if I want to go ahead and switch out components. But for now, I think it's flying just fine as it is, so I don't really have any of those changes in my forefront of my mind. So the batteries that I'm running, I have 6 of them here. You can see these are the GNB 450 1S batteries, and they are high volt, so they go up to 4.35 volts when you charge them, and then I pretty much run them all the way into the ground. My flight times have been crazy. You'll go ahead and see that when we get to the flight footage here in a second, but I'm really happy with how these things are performing, and being 1S batteries, they're super inexpensive. I got 6 of these for around $25, I believe, on Amazon a little while back, so that's a really, really good price. Yeah, so that's wrapping it up for all the specs of this build here. I'm just running the PH 2.0 connector as well. I forgot to mention that, but I'm really excited to go ahead and show you how this thing performs up in the air. Let's go ahead and roll the flight footage. All right, so here we are. Time to go ahead and get on up in the air with this 75mm ultralight build. And we're gonna go ahead and start off in angle mode, just flying around slow, trying to keep control here. I went ahead and closed my door to my room just so the audio quality would be a little bit better and so my roommates don't have to listen to me talk, but they've graciously agreed to go ahead and let me fly around without annoying them too much, so that's good there. I'm just gonna go ahead and start doing some circles, getting warmed up here. We're gonna do some counterclockwise patterns and then some right-hand clockwise patterns. But yeah, I'm not really a seasoned angle mode pilot anymore. I actually got my start in FPV flying in angle mode, where I was a much, much better pilot flying the Inductrix series. I flew pretty much everything from the original Inductrix all the way up to the Inductrix FPV Plus, which is my favorite in that line. Those were all brushed, and of course that was a whole different setup with those quads. But this is totally different. Of course, it's Betaflight, it's brushless, and even though it's still 1S, it's much more powerful. So throttle management is something that's honestly the biggest challenge I've had to face when flying this quad. There's just so much power. It's almost just as much as my Beta 75X had on 2S, which was again quite crazy there as well. But just some left-hand turns here. This is what I'm most comfortable with, but I will go ahead and spice it up here and do some right-hand turns. Angle mode's a little bit different. There's a lot more action on the yaw stick than anything else. I have heard of the Emu Flight dual axis steering feature that Mr. Shutterbug recently did a video about, and I'm probably going to go ahead and flash Emu Flight on this quad just so I can go ahead and take advantage of that, as well as an overall a smoother flying experience for whoops, as I've heard. But either way, we're going to have to go ahead and do a little more research and a deep dive into that. But if I do end up changing it, I will go ahead and make a follow-up video and show you guys what I'm rocking with on this quad down the line. Now, like I said, I used to be a very religious whoop pilot flying indoors, and I would fly race courses very, very often. Of course, brushed whoops are a lot easier to race, again, because the throttle management is a lot easier. But overall, I mean, I can definitely still feel it coming back, but the entire angle mode feeling is a lot different, just because, of course, you have different rates. I've never tuned anything in angle mode. The Inductrix boards just came pretty well tuned stock, and whatever low rates, high rates there was programmed right into the board were what you pretty much flew with. And of course, I got pretty comfortable with those. For the longest time even, I was flying with a Blade MLP toy grade controller, so switching over to like a DX6E or whatever I did at the tail end of my tiny whooping career, I really changed the game here. But I guess my point is that it's not really the same as it was back then. Yeah, so we're just flying around. Definitely not being able to hear the motors has been affecting my throttle management. That's something that is a little bit hard to do with the door closed, of course, and I don't have any earpiece of any kind, as well as I'm pretty sure that this VTX on the board does not support any sort of microphone or anything like that, so that's going to be a little difficult. We are going to start getting into some tighter gaps here. I've set these stools out, but I'm not overly confident that I can hit them super fast. Again, throttle management, it's not really the rates. I can go pretty much wherever I want, but it's really hard for me to get up in the ceiling fan here, again, because throttle management is really important, and I'll end up crashing pretty quickly. I can almost guarantee you that in this long flight time, I will be crashing at least once, so stay tuned for that, and I'll be able to tell you guys how turtle mode works. And spoiler alert, it actually works really well, which is very, very pleasing. That's something that flying brushed whoops was a huge downfall of. I believe the Inductrix FPV Plus did have a turtle mode. It's like a meow mode or something like that, whatever they called it, and that was nice. However, that was such a heavy brushed quad, and the turtle mode wasn't all that effective. These nice lightweight builds and the brushless motors will make turtle mode a lot more reliable, and overall I think it's just going to be a better experience all around. So you can see I almost got too much throttle up in there going into the guest bedroom. We're going to go ahead and turn around. If you guys are looking at the OSD, you can see we're already in 4.5 minutes of flight time, and I do need to go ahead and calibrate my milliamp hour sensor, milliamp hour reading right there. You can see we're already way off on that. That's one thing that flight control board manufacturers need to go ahead and step up their game on, because I really do get annoyed when they don't come calibrated right out of the box, especially when it's an all-in-one board that already has the ESC on it. So they can pretty easily say the amperage draw straight to the flight controller, of course, because they are on the same board. So yeah, like I said, still kind of learning the ropes of analog flying, and of course, oh, there we go. Yep, upside down, trying to go through there. I'm gonna go ahead and flip it into turtle mode. You can see pretty easily, didn't even have to give it full stick, and we are back up in the air. But this time we're up in acro mode, and this thing I would argue flies a lot better in acro mode than it does in angle mode, at least on the stock Betaflight tune. So I'm really happy with this, and of course it has a lot of power for pretty decent freestyle. You can see that there. It wasn't pretty considering that we're in such a small space, but you can still get right around with some good flips and rolls, and of course there is the refrigerator door. But honestly, I'm pretty happy with how the thing flies in acro mode. And keep in mind, these are my freestyle rates, so they are really high, very touchy. I'm only using probably about 10% of my stick travel just to kind of wheel this thing around here. But overall, it's still very fun. Oh, and we're down again. Back up, thankfully. I have found that this quad flies really well on the stock Betaflight tune. It doesn't perform like a Cinope that gets caught up on the walls whenever you hit something. You probably saw that if you watched my recent 95X video or my diatone Taycan videos that I've made, that pretty much anytime you hit something, you just have to disarm and let it fall to the ground. It almost sucks itself to the wall there. But because this one's not as heavily tuned, it really does not need that. So I guess it still has some of the deficiencies of Betaflight for whoops, meaning that it has a little bit of a delayed response time whenever you hit something. However, it's not as bad just because it's not so high on the PIDs and the filters and things like that are needed for Cinopes to get smooth cinematic shots. So I'm really happy with how this quad is flying. Like I said, we're just cruising around in acro mode. I'm not taking too many risks because I don't really want to break this thing, nor do I find that to have a real point when you're flying in such an enclosed area. But you can see handles very nicely all around. One thing that I found is interesting about this board, and I'm not totally sure if this is a real big issue for me or if it is for you, but this quad in particular has had a very interesting issue with the accelerometer calibration. And I'm ending my battery here, but it just gets out of whack really quickly. That's a battery, but I'll tell you a little more about that after we get back. But yeah, like I was saying, this accelerometer on the board seems like it doesn't like to stay calibrated. Maybe it's not as high of a quality unit, but I'm not totally sure. Either way, after a few hard knocks in angle mode, it seems like it's always pulling one way or the other. Of course, it's only as easy as just resetting the accelerometer calibration when you're flat on the ground, but it's a minor annoyance while you're flying. That's just something I found. Unfortunately, I couldn't really quite sneak it into the end of the flight there. Wasn't really watching my voltage. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. I'm super excited to see where this quad takes me for my tiny whoop experience, of course, and just flying micros in general. They're a whole different ballpark from the larger quads that have more weight and momentum to them and more power for freestyle performance. This thing flies very efficiently, and getting almost 7.5 minutes of flight time just by adding 5 grams to that original Mr. Shutterbug formula is really good, and I'm super happy with this thing. And of course, 7 minutes and 30 seconds is more than enough for any of my needs.